Afternoon. My name is Sara Manuelli. I'm the Communications Officer of the Mountain Partnership Secretariat. I'm based at FAO in Rome, and today I will be your facilitator for this session of the Aqua Team course. Today is the last day of the first week of the course, and I'd like to join to welcome our two speakers, lecturers Filippo Verre and Hugo Mantilla Meleg. Before I introduce Filippo, just to remind you a couple of housekeeping rules. Please use the chat and raise your hand. There will be a session dedicated to questions at the end of each intervention. We'll give about 10 minutes. Please stay muted so not to disturb the others. And this meeting will be recorded, so we'll also be able to display the recorders on our website. Thank you. And today we'll be talking with Filippo Verre about industrial desalination as a tool to solve the urban water crisis, the Saudi approach applied to the South African case. I'm very interested to hear about that. And later, Hugo Mantilla Meluk will talk about water in the Central Andes of Colombia and building on a transsectoral and transdisciplinary capacities for water governance, a very important topic. May I just remind our lecturers that they have about an hour for their presentation, then we'll leave about 10 minutes for questions and answers, and if time allows, we'll have a short coffee break. Then we'll have a second speaker, same 1 hour, 10 minutes, and we aim to end at 17:30 Central European Time. Okay, then, so let me introduce, it's my pleasure to introduce Filippo Verre. Filippo is the co-founder and executive director of AB Aqua, Centro Studi Idrostrategici, which is the first Italian hydrostrategy think tank. Very interesting. He holds a PhD in International Sciences, Geopolitics from the University of Pisa, and has completed postgraduate studies at Oxford and SIOI, the Italian Society for International Organization. Filippo's research focuses on the geopolitics of water, Asian geoeconomic structures, and Sub-Saharan and Middle Eastern political history. So I'm looking forward to hear, Filippo, your presentation, and please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you for this presentation. Before starting, I would like to thank Mr. Livio Spadavecchia, who gave me the opportunity to be here and to present in front of this very important institution, my lecture of today. And thank you also for presenting me. And before starting, I will share my screen so I can talk with you with some visual material. Do you see everything? Can I go? Everything is good? Okay. I will talk about industrial desalination as a tool to solve water crisis. The Saudi approach applied to the South African case. I've been asked to deliver a lecture, to do a lecture about some practical case. I think this is very interesting because we will face in our future, in the next years, a lot of problems of water shortages. We will have a water crisis. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. This is going to happen, and we, of course, we will need to be prepared to face these problems when they will happen. I will talk about 6 points. This is the agenda. First of all, I will start describing the socioeconomic effects of a water crisis, and I will focus on big urban agglomerations. As a case study, I will talk about the Cape Town water crisis, which occurred in 2018. I will also talk about desalination, which is considered nowadays an important tool to prevent and to fix when they are already happening, water crisis and water shortages. As an empirical case, I will refer to Saudi Arabia's desalination approach, and I will focus also on the advantages and disadvantages. As we will see in this presentation, Saudi Arabia adopts a very aggressive industrial desalination technique, which has also some disadvantages that cannot be ignored. I will also mention solar desalination, which can be a solution to fix water crisis, and I will mention also two cases already happening in sub-Saharan Africa, which is Kenya and Namibia. What are the expected outcomes? At the end of my presentation, I will be very happy if people who are listening to this presentation will know better about these 5 points. The first one is understanding the economic impact of a water crisis. Because often when we think about lack of water for an extended period of time, we tend to consider it as a stress from like a social perspective, like we don't have, for example, water to cook, to clean ourselves, or to drink. These are very serious issues. But the most important thing is that lack of water can have an economic impact, not only locally, but also on a national level, especially if the city, the large urban agglomeration involved is an important one. And I will provide several cases. One is Cape Town, but also will mention other cases. Second point, also very important, as we will see in this presentation, our world, our planet will be in the next decades an urban area. Many large cities are being built every day, every year by year. Urban population is growing, so we will have many big urban areas. We need also to plan these urban areas in a very sustainable way concerning water supply and water sanitation in order to prevent possible problems related to public health. Third point, I will try to understand and I will try to describe the environmental impact of fossil-driven industrial desalination. Because often this technique, desalination, is considered a tool to solve water crisis, and to a greater extent it is. Desalination can solve many problems, but the problem is also consisting in the sustainability of this approach, especially on the environmental impact. The Saudi approach, as I will try to describe, is very interesting because it will make us understand that desalination is a solution, but can have also strong environmental impact if it's fossil driven. Number 4, there are other alternatives. In this case, I will focus on solar energy market applied to desalination. Number 5, which is strictly intertwined with number 4, is understanding how sub-Saharan Africa can prevent future water crisis using solar energy, and this could be a sort of new socio-economic strategy for sub-Saharan Africa. Going on, I will adopt 3 approaches in my presentation. The first one is a generic one. I consider it a macro general approach. I will focus on the complexity and on the real problems linked with a water crisis from understanding large urban agglomerations. When we talk about a water crisis, we can talk about basically everything, like ecosystem, communities, rural areas. Well, my focus today will be on large urban agglomeration. Second approach I will adopt in this presentation is a micro-empirical one. I will try to understand what happened in Cape Town in 2018 and what were the measures that were not adopted and what could have been done to prevent this crisis. And during that very complicated months between February and April 2018, I will try to understand what didn't work and what could have been done better during the crisis. Third approach, solution-based approach. In the last one, in this last approach, I will try to add something personal. I will try to say what I think is good for the future, what I think could be adopted, based, of course, on the research and on the material that I will provide in this presentation. Okay, let's start. As I was saying, I was mentioning earlier, we are becoming an urbanized planet. When we consider some data, some statistics, we are facing, this is what is our reality. Nowadays, 55% of the global population lives in urban areas. It is a relevant number. 8 billion people nowadays today live on the planet. So more than 4 billion basically are live in urban areas. This is a number that is going to be increased in the future. In fact, in 2050, not so far from now, this percentage will be at 68%. So almost 70% of population will live in large urban areas. On top of that, we have also to consider the rise of temperatures, climate change, and of course the rapid population growth. So all these factors are factors and also are facts that will pose a great risk to water supply worldwide, in particular in big cities and megalopolis. These two pictures are pretty similar, even though they represent two different events. The left one is the water crisis in Cape Town 2018. We will talk extensively in this presentation. The second one is the water crisis in Chennai. We, as Aqua, my organization, we studied both these crises, and unfortunately, we noticed that there are many things in common concerning what happened and before and what happened during the water crisis. Moral of story, in the event of a water crisis, large urban agglomerations are subjected to have the worst moments, the worst crisis concerning water shortages and water supply for many citizens. I think this is an interesting chart because it shows something that is going to happen and is pretty interesting and to some extent also scary to consider. This is a chart that shows the projected population of large urban agglomeration in a temporal span of 90 years. The first thing that came across my mind when I was doing research for this presentation and when I came across this chart was that Tokyo in 2010 was by far the first city concerning the number of inhabitants. There were 36 million people in 2010. Well, in 2100s, Tokyo won't even make the column because there will be cities that will be way more populated, bigger, and so this is basically what we find now very big and very complicated to manage. In like 80 years will be basically nothing because there will be many more realities of demographic and urbanization, extensive problems. The second thing that I noticed in this chart is that Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, but in general Africa, will be a protagonist in this in managing this phenomenon, because as you can see here, I put some numbers at the bottom of each column, and this number symbolizes the number of African cities that will be in the chart and in the column. So in 2010 there was only Cairo. Then in 2025 3 African cities, 2050 3, 6 25 years later, and 2100s 9 cities. So as we know, as we see by this data, Africa will be the forefront of this phenomenon of large urban agglomeration and exponential growth of urban population. This picture that you can see here is a picture of a floating slum in Lagos. I mentioned Nigeria because Nigeria is a case of an interesting case, and I will mention also in a few slides. You can imagine, judging by this picture, how complicated it is for people who dwell in these slums to have access to clean water, to safe water, and basically to have access to any form of water, because of course the water that you can see here is not drinkable. It's not you cannot use it in any capacity. This is because in these cities the work opportunities, job opportunities are far higher than rural areas, and people will go in these urban agglomerations and will make them even bigger. And the example of Lagos is very evident. What is the problem with water and urbanization? The problem is that we are basically year after year, we are adding entire areas in our big cities with no planning, with no urban planning. In fact, we have a reality in which we face overcrowded, impoverished, and as I was saying, unplanned settlements. Basically, like a block, every part of the cities is being added one after another, creating, of course, a lot of problem. And in fact, large urban areas are vulnerable to water scarcity, and this, of course, can create a lot of problems for everyday life. In this chart, in this map, you can see that already nowadays there are some areas that can be considered mega slums in sub-Saharan Africa. I mentioned Lagos in Nigeria, Luanda in Angola, Cape Town in South Africa, and so on. Another aspect that should be considered concerning large urban agglomeration is that is not only the quantity, but also the quality of the water that can be consumed by the people. Because in a case of a mega slum, the quality of the water most likely will not be so satisfying, will not be adequate to human life. And this can be even a worse problem concerning for example, the constant threat of disease outbreaks such as a disease such as cholera that can have important repercussions, not only individually, but also socially, because of the spread of this disease. So these are things that should be considered in terms of managing water resources. So now it's interesting also to consider that the relationship between max urbanization and fertility rate, because often when we consider problems related with water, something that comes up very quickly is the number of people that are alive on the planet. For sure, more people means more water needed to clean, to clean ourselves, to cook, to irrigate, to have food, etc. But the reality is that with max urbanization, the fertility rate drops because of several aspects that I will mention in the few slides. But so far, just at first glance, it's interesting to notice that Africa is always considered as the next demographic bomb. The reality is that as decades go by, Africa will reduce its population, and this is because of max urbanization. For example, the case of Nigeria is that the UN has recently revised the projections of Nigeria's population, and has cut as many as 100 million citizens that were projected for 2060. And the same thing at the end of the century, 350 million. As you can see down here, Nigeria's fertility rate has dropped from 6.5 to 5.2 children per woman, and this is not is by no means an isolated case. In fact, is a general trend. Mali, Senegal, and Ghana, to mention other sub-Saharan nations, have experienced the same problem. This is because areas such as like Lagos, as I mentioned, Nairobi, Cairo, Johannesburg, Addis Ababa, but also Cape Town, etc., Luanda, will increase the number of their citizens, and this will become automatically the population of African people will be will go down. This is because if compared to rural areas, life in big cities is very complicated, is busier, is more dynamic, and most importantly, women that live in big cities probably will have a career, will have a job, and when a woman works, it's not so easy to have also many children. So in this next slide here, we notice that this has been a general trend for people on our world. Essentially, when after the urbanization of people across the globe, after a certain time, decades, the fertility rate dropped. For example, in 1950, the fertility rate on a global level was of 5. The average now is 2.4. Concerning Africa, you can see here very well. For example, in Niger, in 1950 it was 7 to reach until 1980 almost 8 children per woman. Now it's 6.7. The same for Nigeria, 5.2. Senegal, Ghana, all these fertility rates dropped consistently because as years go by, the population, if we consider the dwellers in urban areas, drops consistently. So far, we have considered the social and the demographic effect of a water shortage in an urban area. I think it's now time to dedicate some energy to understand what is the economic impact of water shortages. For example, take a look at this map. I think it's interesting to note that this map shows in light blue the countries that experience little or no water scarcity in their everyday life or in their current activity. It's not a coincidence that the country where there is little or no water scarcity are the ones in which the productivity is higher. The job opportunities are more, and the economic productivity in general is bigger. On the other hand, countries that have little or moderate or in some case intense water scarcity face more problems in productivity and in having better working and economic perspective for their populations. This is because water basically intersects every sector or almost every sector of productivity. In this interesting UN World Water Report, Development Report 2016, we can find all the information we need about this, because as stated in the report, more than 1.4 billion jobs, which accounts for 42% of the world's total workforce, are heavily dependent on water. In addition, we have to consider that 1.2 billion jobs, that are almost 40% of the world's total workforce, have an average level of dependence on water. Essentially, almost 80% of the global workforce depends on water. So in other words, what this data shows us, basically, it shows us that in case of a water crisis, in case of a lack of water for a period of time that can be brief but can also be pretty consistent, weeks, months, the productivity of that area stops almost immediately. So we can imagine what can go on for many months of this. I mentioned briefly the case of Chennai water crisis in 2019. Well, it's a very interesting case because Chennai is a very relevant city within the Indian production system. For example, in Chennai, there are approximately 40 or 45% of the production of cars in India. So not only in the city or in the Tamil Nadu state. And there are also other important activities in India concerning healthcare and other aspects. Well, in 2019, the water crisis that paralyzed basically Chennai cost India 1 or 2 points of the GDP production for that year. This means that if the urban area, the large urban agglomeration that is dealing with this water crisis, if it's an important area for the national system, this can have an effect also, not only on the local, but on the national level. So this, of course, needs to be considered. Okay, now it's time to move to the second part of my presentation, which is the micro-empirical approach. In this case, I will talk about Cape Town water crisis. First of all, I think it's interesting to understand the magnitude and the relevance of Cape Town in South African economic system. We are not talking about a normal city. Cape Town is one of the main South Africa's economic centers, and someone considers Cape Town as the economic capital of the country. Here, as you can see, there are some numbers, some statistics that are interesting. Of course, you don't need to know every numbers that is here, but a couple are, I think, important to know to understand exactly what we are talking about. For example, this one here, 9.5% of the national workforce is in Cape Town. Basically, if there is a problem, this can have an impact, of course, in the employment of national employment of South Africa. Basically, 1 out of 10 workers work in Cape Town concerning South Africa. So it's pretty interesting. And accordingly, almost 10% of the national GDP of South Africa is produced in Cape Town, as you can see here, 9.6. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, between February and April 2018, Cape Town experienced a really complicated moment, a moment that lasted for several weeks, to be concrete. And it was so serious that the authorities declared the day zero, which is one of the most terrifying moments when it comes with water crisis, because it's the day in which the authorities declare there is no water for any activity, which is like having a shower, going to the restaurant, or even having any sort of production in terms of economic approach. What caused the Chennai water crisis? Well, essentially there were 3 main reasons: demographics, meteorological instability, and administrative conflicts. As I was describing at the beginning of this presentation, a huge problem for the future in managing water supply will be the increase of people who dwell in large urban agglomerations. Well, what happened in Cape Town was exactly this. In a couple of decades, basically, the population of the town almost doubled. So this shows an important population growth, of course, following a relevant economic productivity. At the same time, the construction of the facilities was not followed accordingly, because only 15% of the water facilities of Cape Town were adapted, were built, were reshaped following the increase in the demographic growth. As you can see, this picture is very interesting because this is the dam, the major dam of Cape Town, the Theewaterskloof Dam. I hope I pronounce it correctly, and I hope there is no problems in the pronunciation. And here, as you can see, this was in 2013, 2012, where there was no problem in terms of precipitation, and the rainfall was on average. And here is the same picture taken from a different angle that shows the desertification almost complete of the um, water reservoir. So the biggest problem was that only this construction, this water facility was supplying the water resources for Cape Town, and this was a pretty old facility because it was built in 1978 and inaugurated in 1980. So things needed to be updated to have a better management for potential water crisis, like in fact it happened in 2018. Another factor, as I mentioned earlier, is the lack of rainfall, meteorological crisis. This is an interesting and rather sad picture because it shows the change in the water supply for the biggest water reservoir in Cape Town. In 4 years, basically, more than 60-70% of the water was basically disappeared. This is because the years between 2016 and 2018 were the driest in the country since 1933, which is basically when the precipitation started to be recorded in South Africa. So it was the perfect and a sad perfect combination, because there was dry conditions, so climate change, lack of precipitation, increase in population, almost doubled, as we said, and lack of in water facilities, that basically water facilities were not updated. So it was the perfect combination. But on top of that, what happened was also that there was a conflict between the authorities that were ruling the municipality, the province, and the nation of South Africa. So, according to South African law, it is the central state's duty to project, finance, and build public infrastructures, while local administrations are responsible for the management of the facility and for the correct use. In the case of the Cape Town water crisis, there was a political conflict between the Democratic Alliance, which then was the party that was ruling the province and the city, and the African National Congress, which is a national political organization that was ruling the parliament of South Africa, so was the leading party. This bureaucratic dichotomy created a lot of problems, and of course, in a moment of like a water crisis, when the time is essential to fix the problems and to operate, this dichotomy can have a lot of problems, can have big impacts. In fact, during those weeks, there was a case. For example, I remember while I was studying this case that Israel offered to build a desalination plant in Cape Town, but there were a lot of problems in managing the political aspects and the organizational and administrative tasks. So nothing came out of the Israeli proposal because of the delay and the conflicts that started between these two political organizations. So I briefly introduced the desalination as a potential solution, mentioning the Israeli case. But I think it's interesting to understand, and we are entering the third phase of my presentation, the solution-based approach. I think it's interesting, as I was saying, to consider a strategy that can be adopted. Desalination, industrial desalination. We know that we have a lot of water at our disposal on Earth, but unfortunately, the majority, almost the majority, almost the total of the water is not used. We cannot use it. We cannot drink it because it's water of the sea. We know we have the technique to use this water if we desalinize water. An interesting case in this is Saudi Arabia. The first thing that we may think about Saudi Arabia is that is a land of desert. No, it's a very arid land, deserts everywhere, and maybe the second thing that we can think about when we consider Saudi Arabia is the fact that there is a lot of oil in under the ground, and these things are for sure these are facts as well. But Saudi Arabia, not so many people know that, but Saudi Arabia is a water power. Saudi Arabia nowadays is a net exporter, not importer, net exporter of agricultural food and agricultural products. In addition, Saudi Arabia is an exporter of flowers to the Horn of Africa, but also to Eastern Asia. This is because of several reasons, but mainly because of the large-scale use of desalination plants. Basically, Saudi Arabia has an abundance of water, desalinated water, that of course is very important for the economic production and for the production of agricultural products. Which is the main responsible of this of the Saudi wealth in water? It's a company called Saline Water Conversion Corporation, which is a company founded in 1974, and it is the largest seawater desalination company in the world. As you can see here, there are some numbers. Of course, these numbers are not particularly relevant, but I think it's interesting to know because they give us an idea of the magnitude of this company. There are 30 large desalination plants of this company, 4,000 kilometers of water pipeline, and they have this company has a commercial value of over 20 billion US dollars. It's a giant, basically, that is the main responsible of Saudi Arabia's increase of water and production desalination water. Here, as you can see in this slide, you can see the geographical position of the Saudi's desalination plants. The majority, as you can see, are in the western coast on the Red Sea, while there are, of course, others pretty large. For example, Khobar and Jubail in the eastern area. On the right here on this map, you can see also that across the years, Saudi Arabia's production of desalinated water increased over and over and over. So it's not only a fact and something that has happened because basically Saudi Arabia started to produce desalinated water at an industrial capacity at the end of the 80s. But in the last 2 decades, this production has increased exponentially. And as you can see, starting from 2016, Saudi Arabia has the production skyrocketed and became very, very important. What are the impacts of the presence of this massive presence of water in Saudi Arabia? Well, the adoption of very smart techniques in terms of irrigation. For example, Saudi Arabia can count on center pivot irrigation, which is a technique used also in other parts of the world that can guarantee the maximization of the results with very, very little usage of water. In fact, this mechanism allowed Saudi Arabia to change diet. The Saudis now have almost a Mediterranean diet to some extent because they can count on eggs, chicken, meats, milk, dairy, wheat. All these things were not considered, were not used in the traditional Saudi diet. Only the richest family could afford meat that most likely was imported by foreign markets. In fact, until a few decades ago, dates were the main products of the Saudi agricultural sector. This is because this fruit required little water to grow. As I was saying, we have also to say that what Saudi Arabia can count also on water in under the ground. Many thousands of years ago, I think 10, 12,000 years ago, Saudi Arabia was not a desert, but was extremely, was like an immense forest, lakes, rivers, etc. This, of course, now has changed, but under the ground there are several billions of cubic meters of water that, of course, can be used to irrigate and as well as the desalinated water. As I was saying, the central pivot irrigation is not something that is used only in Saudi Arabia, but for example, here we are in Western Australia, in which there are many crops of this that use this technique. This is interesting because, for example, this is a central pivot irrigation big field photographed from the sky. This is on the left. On the right, we can find what happened in Saudi Arabia across time. In 1987, basically when the desalinated water started to be produced on a larger scale, nobody cultivated crops like this using central pivot irrigation. On the other hand, 1991, you can see some improvement. 2000, many more. 2012, basically a very big concentration of this technique. And of course, you can imagine how the situation is now in 2023, where many more cubic meters of waters are pumped every day in the Saudi system. So this could be something, could be a solution if we take the Saudi's case, Saudi's approach. We can say easily that this could be a solution for all the problems. Actually, if we evaluate all the conditions, we can say that Saudi's desalination approach is not for every country. It's not so replicable in other areas of the world because it's very expensive and it's very polluting. Here you can see in this chart the list of the wealthy nations per capita emissions, and Saudi Arabia is the first one. Stands as the most pollutant and the country that has the most emissions. This is because the industrial desalination, Saudi Arabia's industrial desalination is extremely expensive and extremely pollutant. 1/3 approximately of the oil extracted in the country, which is a lot because Saudi Arabia extracts a lot of oil, is used to produce desalinated water. In this regard, in 2016 alone, Saudi Arabia emitted more than 517 million tons of CO2 in the atmosphere, making it one of the largest contributors to carbon emissions on a global scale. In these two charts, we can see this even with more evidence. This is the emissions per capita of all the countries, not only the wealthy ones. Saudi Arabia is number 4. And here we can see how the emissions skyrocketed in the period between 1970 and 2021. Largely, this is because of the highly usage of desalination as a tool to fix water shortage in Saudi Arabia. This is, as you can see here in this slide, the list of the countries that produce desalinated water on the highest scale, so the largest producers. As you can see, there is Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kazakhstan, Algeria, United States of America, Kuwait, and so on. All these countries have one thing in common, which is they have a lot of fossil fuels in their territory, under their grounds, and they have basically a lot of in their capacity they can count on a lot of fossil fuels. In fact, it is not a coincidence that, as I write here, until recently, the majority of desalination plants have been located in regions with high availability of fossil fuels, because the industrial, so the massive production of desalinated water requires a lot of fossil fuels to work, to function. There is another approach, and here I'm entering to the last part of my presentation, where I try to find solutions to the problem of water shortages and also the fossil-driven desalination. The solution that could be applied is solar-powered desalination. Nowadays we can manage pretty easily the construction of desalination plants using solar energy. In fact, according to International Renewable Energy Agency, in the next few years, renewables will play a relevant role in producing desalinated water, and in particular, solar is extremely important in this, because is the most promising renewable energy to produce water due to its ability to drive the more popular thermal desalination system directly through solar collectors, and so on. The world's current solar energy capacity is 850.2 gigawatts, which has grown and is constantly growing year by year. As you can see here in this chart, the production has been implemented basically every year, starting from 2011. However, we have a very high potential, because it is estimated that up to 173,000 terawatts of solar energy can hit the Earth in any given moment. We are talking about an immense energy, extremely powerful, but also sustainable. It has no counter effects. So renewables, in particular solar energy, are becoming incredibly mainstream, and we are years by years almost we are becoming we can control the processes, and we can build even more performing solar cells and photovoltaic panels. If we take a look at the renewable energy sector, solar is still a little bit behind. We have hydroelectric, which is the most traditional form of renewable energy, wind, which is growing, but also solar. So we are using solar energy more and more as time goes by. This is an interesting chart, in my opinion, because it shows the potential of the market. So as you can see, these are the forecasts for 2020-2027. Middle East and Africa, the violet ones, are, of course, the areas where this way of producing desalinated water will be more relevant. Essentially, there is a large market potential for this technique and for this source of energy, for a number of reasons that I will present in the coming slide. First of all, concerning Africa, we have to consider that according to the International Energy Agency, Africa has a lot of potential, probably actually the best solar potential, but so far this potential has not been fully satisfied, fully developed. In fact, only 1% of solar generation capacity is being exploited by African states, but there is a huge potential, as we can see in this chart. The same agency suggests that Africa needs to invest a lot of money to make this potential something that is feasible, and not something that still remains in a potential scale. So 190 billion US dollar per year should be invested, according to the agency. As you can see here, as you can see in this map, Africa has a lot of solar energy, especially in the Sahara area here, but also in Namibia, in the Namib Desert, but basically everywhere. What is interesting in this, not only the potential, but also the growing attention that solar market is having as time goes by in Africa. In fact, concretely, many European, global, African institutions are pledging to invest and to create the best economic and environmental scenario to invest and to create opportunities. Like the World Bank, African Development Bank, European Union, European Investment Bank, all these institutions are investing a lot of money in this new market. Now I am about to close my presentation. I will just mention two brief cases of things that are already in place in sub-Saharan Africa involving solar desalination plants. I will talk about Kenya and Namibia. Basically, this is a very interesting case because in Kenya, in a little village called Kiunga, close to the Somalian border, a new solar-powered water desalination plant nowadays provides 35,000 liters of fresh water per day, which is an interesting amount of water. This plant serves over 25,000 residents, so it's an interesting number for sure. According to Give Power, which is the International Energy Foundation responsible for the construction of the project, the Hyunga solar desalination plant cost only $500,000 and took 1 month to construct. It's very interesting. These numbers are very, very interesting because, in other words, $500,000 is very, very little money for a municipality or for a nation, for a country. And of course, this can have an impact on the water that can be provided to people, and it took only 1 month to construct. While, for example, to build Saudi's desalination power plants, it took years and years of planning and months of construction. And also, it has very, very little, if not minimum, impact on sustainable on the sustainability of the environment, on the environment, because it's a very sustainable mean of producing water. The Namibian case is even more interesting because in this case we are talking about a joint initiative between the University of Namibia and the University of Turku in Finland. And this is the project. The technology company that actually built the solar desalination plant is Solar Water Solutions. It's a Finnish company, and this company basically was able to build a plant that operates on 100% renewable energy, so zero carbon emissions, with important results as well. More details about Namibia is that this water provides drinking and irrigation water. So the quality of the water that comes out of this desalination process is very, very good. Other details show that the plant produces 3,500 liters of water per hour. So it's a very good quantity, and of course quality, because if the water can be used also to drink, it means that the quality of the water is very, very good. And as we have seen earlier, not only the quantity, but it's important to preserve the quality of the water to avoid the spread of diseases and the outbreaks of epidemics and pandemics, as we know. Why Namibia? Namibia is an interesting case, not only for the solar desalination approach, but also because Namibia could be a case to export also in other areas. As we can see here, Namibia is one of the basically driest country in Africa, with the desert of Namib that is a very long desert, over 2,000 kilometers, from southern Angola to northern South Africa. Imagine having here a network of solar energy plants that can produce water that can be basically reused to industrial, agricultural, and social purposes. Because what is really important is that after constructing several solar desalination plants, a network of pipelines, water pipelines, could be implemented to transfer basically the water directly from the ocean here to the internal areas of Namibia. And this is something feasible because it's already being done, but can be also done in other parts of the sub-Saharan Africa that deal with the same problem. Last slide, and then I will conclude my presentation. What are the advantages of solar power desalination? Well, there are many. I stated three basically. The containment of the construction costs. Both Solar Water Solution Ltd, the Finnish one, and Give Power say that produced a lot of material that says basically that the costs are down under many circumstances. And this can be also pretty easily to verify because these plants are pretty small and they're nothing compared to the Saudis' very efficient but also very expensive plants. Number two, very important, there is a very environmental friendly approach with this mechanism, with this process. In fact, according to both Solar Water Solution and Give Power, this way of producing desalinated water has zero emissions and has zero carbon footprint, which is extremely important in this modern era. Third, also extremely important, is the increasing investment and, as I was mentioning earlier, the growing global attention on this subject, on this matter. In the years and in the decades to come, many European, but not only, many Western, Asian institutions, bank institutions will invest a lot of money in the solar market and, most importantly, in the desalination plants using solar energy. So to conclude, these are the bibliography that I used for my presentation. The Saudi approach is, from a teleological standpoint, a good approach because it creates water from the sea and gives us the opportunity to have water from the sea, water that we can actually use. The problem is that it's extremely expensive, as I mentioned, and very pollutant. What we can do is to have solar desalination power plants that maybe have less quantity of water produced per day, but has for sure a better approach in terms of managing the financial expenditure, but also having less negative approach on the environmental for the environmental problems. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Filippo Verre, for this fascinating insight on how to address strategies to address the water crisis. I see a few hands up. I can see here Maurizio Angeloni has a question. Would you like to take the floor? No, maybe that was a thumb up. Do we have any questions? Okay, so if there are no questions.
Sorry.
Yes.
You listen to me. No, just a question to Filippo. When you talk about solar energy, I imagine you talk about solar thermal energy, not photovoltaic, because they are different forms of having energy from solar plants. And because solar thermal energy is easier to build up in plants than thermal. And but both, I think they need a lot of maintenance And also we have to deal with the problem with the waste, because the panels once in a while should be changed. Also, they have to be maintained, because they cannot get dirty. Or so these are things that we have to consider, especially in the developing countries, where the maintenance is. You have to train technicians to this. And second question, thank you for your explanation, because the water lack of water can trigger a dangerous chain of collateral effects. Last but not least, war to have the water sources, no? And also migration, because when there is a drop of water sources, especially in agriculture, in the countryside, people move to urban side, then increase over there the lack of water, then they are forced to migrate and even leaving the country for near countries. So we should study also different strategies to face this problem. For instance, to study measures to save water or recover water. That's my point of that's all.
Thank you very much, Maurizio, for your questions. I will try to answer. I was referring both to solar thermal and photovoltaic, but with a prevalence of solar thermal, because, as you said, is the more frequent, and it's the technique that we at the moment have. We can count on more. And the problem about waste water is you raised a very interesting point, and this will be the next challenge for using on an industrial and on a massive scale desalination, because the problem is the waste of water, which is extremely salty. The component of the water that is extracted is extremely salty liquid, which is an industrial, of course, waste that often, if it's not well treated, can have a tremendous impact on the environmental coastline of the countries. Of course, research in the coming years will have an impact in that, but the waste is a problem not only for solar power, but in general for industrial desalination, even fossil-driven techniques. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? I see a hand. Amal, would you like to pose a question? Perhaps you. Yes.
Thank you, Professor, for your presentation. Actually, I have two questions. The first one is the disadvantage of using solar energy in desalination plant. And the second one is if we use the wind energy, it will be more appropriate or less in the cost of the construction of the desalination plant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What was the first question? Sorry.
The first one is the disadvantages of using the solar energy in constructing the desalination plant.
The disadvantages are that for the moment we can count on little plants that can have impacts on rural areas where, of course, the inhabitants are less than big cities or large urban agglomerations. But a solution to this could be to build more, instead of building one giant or one massive fossil-driven desalination plant. Solution to this could be to build more little plants that can have an impact in case of a water crisis occur. Because, for example, I mentioned the day zero. To have a little or a couple of small solar desalination plants, it's better to have no plants at all. And in this case, you can avoid declaring the day zero if you are a municipality, because you still have a water flow coming from solar solar desalination plants. And wind, of course, is a renewable energy. I focused on solar because I thought, especially considering the Namibian case, sun will be essential in the future, especially in Africa. It will be, as I described in the presentation, sun is very important. It has a lot of potential, especially in certain areas of Africa, Namib area, but Sahara desert as well. So there is a lot of potential there, and it's totally renewable. So it's something that can be applied in the future. But of course, also wind is being a renewable energy, can be used to provide clean and usable water without having an impact on the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I don't see any other questions. So, okay. So again, thank you very much, Filippo Verde, for this very interesting presentation. I now suggest that we have a little break of 10 minutes, and we resume at 16:20 with the second part of our course. And we will have Hugo. Hugo, if that's okay, we'll start in 10 minutes. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was a
See you in
pleasure.
10 minutes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation, Filippo. Very
Thank you.
organized.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna give a good contrast to your presentation. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
I'm sure you will do just fine. Thank you. Thank you.
It's wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a bit. Before I give the floor to Ugo Mantiglia Meluk, I'd like to briefly present him to those who don't know him. He's a dear friend and part of the Mountain Partnership family. But he is most of all the director of the Center for Highland Studies and coordinator of the informatic platform on climate services at the University of Quindio in Colombia. He is a biologist focused on the interface between biodiversity, health, and sustainable development. Hugo is also a professor at the University of Quindio, where he curates the mammals collection and serves as the vice president of the Colombian Association of Zoologists, coordinating the Zoonosis and Climate Change Working Group. Hugo, it's an honor to have you here. You have the floor with your presentation. Thank you.
It's an honor, and it's a great happiness to me being here. As you mentioned, I'm part of the Mountain Partnership. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. And please receive the warmest greetings from the Center for Highland Studies. We are a think tank. We are a group of excellence at the Universidad del Quindío. Is a center that is constituted by 14 research groups. There are more than 42 researchers. And the key point in here, and maybe is this the main topic of my presentation, we are working in a transdisciplinary work on issues that are of global concern, like climate change, biodiversity loss, water governance, environmental surveillance, which will be one of the main topics of this presentation, and under the One Health scheme. And just to mention, as a philosophical note, when in the modern times, so we are asked to work in a transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary way. Actually, the message is that we need further more than the disciplines that we already have. So we need to work in the interfaces. We need to work in a creative way to find new solutions or the solutions to problems that are new. And because of that, are problems that still unsolved. And with that, so as Sarita mentioned, Sarita, it's a pleasure to meet too. I am from Colombia, which the Universidad del Quindío is in South America, this map. And actually the Quindío is located in the middle of the country, as you guys can see here in the mark, the benchmark. And we are part of what we call the coffee cultural landscape. It was declared a human heritage on 25th of June on 2011. And that's the place from where the best coffee of the world comes from and is produced. Is what we call the coffee acts in Colombia. A brief outline, not as organized as Filippo, of my presentation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Andes, the mountains, their diversity, and the ecology of water. This is one of the main subjects. I would like to bring biology to the table. Of course, we need to talk about the Anthropocene, what it is, and talking about climate change as one of the major driven forces of the changes that we have been experiencing all around the world, the intuitive and the non-intuitive facts. So some things that we have been discovered that are not as obvious as the things that we already know, and probably you guys handle better than me. And then we are going to move to the One Health approach and talk about a little bit of environmental surveillance. What is this concept and what it has to do with transdisciplinary and transsectoral work in terms of finding something that is important, which is the governance. And I would like to start with this map, which you guys can see South America and the Andes. And as you guys can see here, so the Andes is considered the spinal cord of South America. It is the longest mountainous range in the world, more than 8,000 kilometers. This is amazing. It crosses across, it runs along 7 countries from Argentina in the south, Chile, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, and Venezuela. And we have pretty high altitudes like the Aconcagua, 6,961 meters. And if you guys can see here in the upper left corner, this is where Colombia is located. And something amazing happens with the Andes enters into Colombia. It is subdivided into 3 different ranges. So we have 3 different Andes in Colombia. I am located in the central range of the Andes. And one of the important things about the mountain ranges is that they participate in a very important way in the, as you guys can see in the left down corner in that picture, what you guys are seeing in the picture is the Andes, so from the south. And you guys can see the effect that these mountains have on the flux of energy, water, and all the gases of the atmosphere. So they are retained on one side of the Andes, and this is what we call the rain shadow effect. And this is very interesting. So it's like, and a take-home message is that it controverts a little bit the idea that we have about the atmosphere in the textbooks that we have in the primary school, in which the Earth is a little small ball and the atmosphere is huge and the stratosphere is very far away. This is not the reality. Actually, the atmosphere is very thin. And because of that, how thin is the atmosphere and how high relatively are the mountains, so they participate in a very strong way in the regulation of water and climate. Look at this. So it's a closer picture to our atmosphere, as you guys can see here. And within this small area. So if you guys look and remember my map, so the life, at least the continental life that we have on the planet, it doesn't goes beyond 5,000 meters, 5 kilometers. It's a walkable distance. Think about a place in your own town, 5 kilometers away, maybe it's on the other side of the city or the town. So it's not very far away. Within this very thin line, okay, which is within another thin line, which is the atmosphere, is where we have what we call the biosphere. All the life that we have is in the continental life is in 5 kilometers or less. And if you add the deep of the sea, let's say that in 10 kilometers, which is also a walkable distance, so it's not very far. So life is concentrated in a very thin line on the earth. And because of that, because of the influence that mountains have on water and climate, they participate in providing several different ecosystem services, and regulating is one of the most important, as you guys can see in the picture. Another medal goal that the Andes is that we are the most diverse mountain range in the world. And actually, we are one of the most diverse areas in the world. So it's maybe the first regional area in terms of diversity on this planet. And I excuse myself, so I have some presentations I just realized in Spanish, but what matters here is the numbers. Almost 2,000 different birds, more than 500 different mammals, more than 30,000 different plants in the Andes. It means that just in the Andes, so we have more diversity than in the whole African continent. And this is the numbers are the same for other groups. And the important thing for this presentation is I would like you guys to follow me with this idea of thinking about those species as pinions of a machinery, of a clock. So each one of those species, the thousands of species that are part of our ecosystems, they play a very important role. And let's say that we are opening a computer or the water machine, the washing machine of your home, and you're starting like taking off pieces. The screw here, the pinion there, the band over there, and the expectation is that at some point, so that machine is not going to work anymore, or is not going is going to malfunction. And this is exactly what is happening with life on Earth. One thing that is pretty intuitive, thinking about climate, water, and life, is that we know, this is very intuitive, as I mentioned, that the abiotic compartments of this planet has an important role in dictating the cycles of life. Mosquitoes have their little mosquitoes in one particular time of the year because of the climate. The mice, they reproduce in a particular time because the climate dictates that this is the time in which they have resources available for their reproduction, which is very expensive. And the same happens for the plants. The flowering period is concentrated on a part of a year depending on the climate. This is pretty intuitive. We knew that. We actually learned how to handle that. So we use that in our domestication of different plants and animals. So because we know how they behave, and we learn about how they behave. The thing that we didn't know and probably learned pretty late is that also nature regulates the climate, and affectations that we made on nature, now they are having a result that is sometimes undesirable. And all the affectations that we made on nature, so they are having an effect, and some of these effects are things that we don't know. So this is to complete my graphic here. So we have this machinery with all these pieces, but the result is that these pieces actually regulates climate, and climate regulates so many different things. And among these cyclicities that are regulated by climate, of course, there are some health issues, there are some production issues, and of course, the risk management is related to how well we understand the climate. And to understand the climate, this is the message, we need to understand the diversity. So it plays a very important role. And now another philosophical point, who we are. So it's a perfect question for 4 p.m. Who we are, and Friday, 4 p.m. Who we are. So there are many different ways to answer this question, but the approach that I'm going to take is by saying that we are a very recent species. We are learning how to behave. We are learning how to move in this planet. Not very far away, and because I know, I'm a professor, and because I know that it's very difficult to make making our minds a real idea about time, I'm going to make this analogy. Let's think that 1 kilometer is a million of years. So our genus, we are Homo sapiens as a species. So our genus, which we share the environment with different other species, some of them, they are now extinct. It appears 2.5 kilometers away. Not very far. But the amazing thing is that our species covers an area that would be like the area of a room, 6 meters. And within these 6 meters, all our technological history is concentrated in a tile, in the corner of the tile, to be precise. And the changes that we have been made in this small period of time, and some of them related to the way in which this planet behaves in terms of their energy dynamic, is very strong. It's very strong. And that's because we, or some scientists, have been proposing that we should call this period the Anthropocene, the period in which humans are dominating, not only in numbers, but also because of the effect that we have on nature. And course is a time to think about the trajectories of our behavior, our relationship with nature. If we continue to do the same things, so the predictions is that we are going to be more vulnerable. There's going to be high poverty, ecosystem degradation, inequity, injustice, global warming levels, high risk. And this is happening because we have unsustainable development actions. We have maladaptation. We still rising the emissions, and we stretch the systems. So we are stretching the nature. And this is something that we need to take into consideration. So in summary, so the composition of gases in the atmosphere matters a lot in the type of planet that we are going to live in. But what are the causes of this? And I'm not going to enter into the details of the numbers, but into something more philosophical too. So I brought this fresco from the Egyptian culture, and I would like you guys to pay attention on what is happening in here. So it is a lot of information in this painting. So the first thing that I notice is that these guys are celebrating that they are pretty successful in having resources, the crops in here. So there are a lot of crops, more than the crops that they need. They need to storage these crops, the excellence. So we based our idea of success in having excellence of things, which is not a dumb idea. Actually, it's a pretty smart idea. But the cost of this, what is? Look at these two Egyptians in the top of the painting. So one of them is cultivating maybe rice, and the second one is logging a tree. So what it means is that in order to have what we need to build the human beings that we are right now, we are simplifying the world. We are changing something that we do not know how it works. A forest is extremely complex. The simplest forest is extremely more complex than any cultivar or any product, any agricultural product. We know how a plantation of maize works. when it flowers, when it blooms, when it produces the fruits, the roots, how fast they grow. We don't know that about the species in the forest. So the way in which we obtain our resources is by simplifying something complex, which is nature. And this simplification involves a lot of different things. So if you have an insect that is eating a plant, you basically eradicated that insect. If your plants need some kind of nutrient that is not in the soil, so you added the nutrient to the soil. And if it needs more water, so you add more water. And this simplification means that you are degrading something that is complex on the other side. So one way to look at the problem of climate change and water is course. So we have raising the emissions, is what is in the left part of the graphic, through all our activities. So this chart can be actually enriched by the different activities that we made. As a result, so we have these emissions. But on the other side, what we have? We destroy the only machine that is able to regulate the climate, which is nature. We don't have the type of machine. It was pretty interesting to look all the efforts and all the energy and the resources, human and monetary resources that we need to desalinate the water. We cannot control the climate. My guess is that first we will be able to desalinate the whole ocean that regulating the climate of this planet, because the only machinery that is able to do that, to handle the complexity, is a complex machine, which is called nature. And water plays an extremely important role in this equation, because water is actually the way by which all this energy is actually moving. And the more gases you put into the atmosphere, the warmer the planet is, the more entropy you have in the water. And that is basically a problem, because we are made of water. The cycles of living things are related to the water cycle, and climate, a representation of the water cycle. So that entropy is a very strong problem for us. So in summary, so if you modify a complex system, which is nature, so the output of this modification is that you lose what we call emergent properties of this complex system. The more complex the system, the more properties they have. And if you start taking off pieces of this system, so you are losing these properties of the system. So this is logical. And is what we have been doing through the usage of our technology. One thing that needs to be addressed is that complex systems, they have another property. They don't fall down step by step. The complexity collapse. And I don't know if you guys have in your own countries, this game is called the Jenga. And it consists, as you guys can see here, a bunch of different pieces of wood, usually. And you start taking pieces of wood, and the person who loses the game is the one that takes the final piece that makes the tower to fall down. So in my perception, this is something that is pretty similar to what we have been doing, playing the Jenga with something complex, which is nature, and we don't know the output of the game. And in this video, hopefully it reproduces, you can see how we do that. It has even an aesthetic value. So there are circles, there are squares, there are patterns that we call the spinal cord fish pattern, and these lines, so is like a painting. You can see that. But this is the moment of the game in which you are taking pieces one by one. Look what happened when you take enough pieces. You don't need anymore the hand of human for the system to collapse. And this is exactly what is happening, and we have been recording that in complex systems. The most complex systems are the first that are compromised, and we have some of them, as you guys could see at the beginning of the presentation. We live in a very complex area with a lot of diversity. One of the first persons that called our attention on that is Mr. Joseph Grinnell, my great parent. And he was the curator of the vertebrate collection of Berkeley. And he says, pay attention to nature because nature regulates a lot of things. And when nature collapses, all these systems are going to collapse. And that might be the end of our humankind. And this is something that is not minor. What happened in mountain systems? In mountain systems, the situation is a little bit more serious because the prediction is that with global warming, the thermal belts that we have in mountains, the lower part is warmer than the upper part when we have the glaciers, are experiencing a migration upwards. And with this migration, so we have not only the moving of different species, but we are forcing the borderline of our productive activities. Agriculture and cattle ranching every day is reaching altitudes in where they were not able before. And as Sarita mentioned, I'm the curator of a mammal collection, and my group of specialists is bats. I'm a South American Dracula, if you guys will. And what you guys can see here, there are predictive models of distribution for this bat, and this bat feeds on nectar. Is a nocturnal hummingbird, so it needs the flower, and it lives in the mountains, and it lives in particular mountains. And let me walk through this map. So in reddish or purple colors here, you see the places in which the bat likes to be. So those are the good places of the house of this bat. And in yellow, you have places that are okay. I can live there, but it's not as comfortable as the pink or purple one. And this is our prediction under the most optimistic scenario in climate change. So the conditions, the climatic conditions of these mountains are going to change extremely rapidly. So fast that they are not going to give any time to those species to evolve their responses to those changes. And another thing that we discovered making these models, playing with these models, is that every single range, mountainous range, has its own personality and it's behaving differently against climate change. So what I'm trying to say, nature is speaking. Nature is telling us things, and it's telling things to the people who is willing to listen. But as a result of all these dynamics that are pretty intense, new arrangements of species have been created all around the world. And this is a very complicated situation because species intermingle, and one of these conversation is through pathogen agents. So species exchange pathogens, and this is a result in this equation of the proximity, as you guys can infer. And if we are constraining these ecosystems, so we are forcing species that never lived before together and in new arrangements and with an exchange of species, and this is a very dangerous situation. Every species has evolved their own pathogens, and let's say that has been negotiating for so long that is able we can live, we can sleep with the enemy, as in the movie. So it's a long-term relationship. But the problem is when you have some other agents that are able to mobilize all these pathogenic agents. And some of these natural vectors of these diseases are the carnivores, because they eat the whole animal and they introduce the animal and the pathogens. So tigers don't read the instructions in the rear parts of our bodies. And mosquitoes, I am sorry, but I'm pretty sure that Sarita, Antonella, Livio, everybody has provided blood samples to mosquitoes. And all of you guys, you guys look very decent people, but I don't know what you guys have between your chest and your back in terms of diseases. So if a mosquito or a tiger goes into a different system, so it goes with the charge of these different potential pathogens. And this is exactly, and this is when bats come into play. And that's why, so as you guys might remember, so everybody blame on the bats as the originators of the COVID-19. And that might be true because of this. But this is just part of the equation. The other part of the equation is how the bats have to, they know how to handle this problem. They have been living for a while and they don't get sick. We get sick. So the problem is how these potential agents find a mechanism to get into us. And this is when a concept that is very interesting and maybe the most important of this presentation comes into place, which is the concept of dilution. And let me move to the mice. Let's say that we have an ecosystem which is in equilibrium, which is represented by these bars of different colors in here that are actually related with the populations of these different mice on your left. And let's say that one of these mice, they have a potential pathogen. These mice and their populations are regulated by the other diversity. Because of what? Because they compete to each other. They compete for food, they compete for shelter, they cannot go everywhere. In nature, when you are in equilibrium, the other species, the diversity that is around is preventing you to spread out. And let's think, so in this type of environment, in this type of scenario. So if you have a system which is not in equilibrium, you have some species that are able to spread, and with that spread of the population, you have the spread of the diseases, and you have a faster spillover of a disease. And eventually, if you have a connector, which is the shadow of this cat, which is eating these mice, but is close to us, this is maybe the connection to a new disease, an emerging disease, we say that. And in the countryside, when we produce all our food and when the impact on the environment is more intense, this is happening every day. With one additional point is that we have a lot of domesticated animals. 34,000 millions of chickens. 34,000 million of chickens. 1,500 millions of cows. They are like petri dishes. I don't know if you're familiar with that. People who works in laboratory uses like little glass dishes, and we cultivate in their bacteria and other things. So every single domestic animal is playing that role. Now, and they are living close to us, and they play an important role in our lives. We have not 900 millions of dogs, 900 millions of dogs, 220 millions of cats. Those are huge numbers. So this is not only making a huge pressure to the environment, but they are something that we don't know, but is the way in which we are going to get, maybe not, maybe yes, but hopefully not a potential new disease that compromise the existence of human beings. So the message, the take-home message here is high diversity maintains the host density low, encounter rates with these hosts of diseases low, and the speed of the spillover low. And the contrary occurs when we diminish the diversity. And this has been tested and proved in different systems. So there are some citations on that. As I mentioned, the other part of the equation are domesticated animals, and in the numbers that I mentioned, so all of these animals are connections with these problems in the wild, but the main problem is the affectation that we have been making on the environment. And this is a graphic that I like a lot. So some pretty smart and nerd people make this graphic, made this graphic in which you can see every single line is a disease that comes from the environment to humans. And you can see here in the middle of this kind of a cloud, chickens, horse, goat, cat, sheep, pig, dog, cattle, that are the transmitters of these zoonotic diseases that come from the environment. This neat course, I'm moving to the second part of my presentation, it needs a new way to look at this, a new paradigm. And this new paradigm is One Health. And One Health refers to thinking about health, but not only from the human perspective. So we need to expand this attention into the environment. And of course, water plays an important role in here. So this is not a new concept. It's a concept that has been revived in many ways because of the problems that we have. But actually, it first come into place in the late 70s, early 80s, and is this Professor Calvin Schwab, who wrote this book. He was a veterinarian, and he was actually making a pledge on the importance of veterinarians, that in some way they were looking in a different scale compared to physicians or people who is working with human health. And he produces what is called the One Health umbrella. And it says we need an umbrella that covers the health of the whole system. And he places in the middle public health. I would change the position of the main character of this umbrella as the environment, the ecology, and then the rest of the things. This is what the evidence and the data that I'm going to show in the last part of my presentation is revealing to us. So One Health is taking care of the animal health, but also taking care of the environmental health in order to promote our own health. And these are pictures of my graduate student who is working with viruses and bats. And this is a sad story, Sarita. We participated in a call for scholarships in Colombia in 2018 and proposed to study coronaviruses and bats in Colombia. And we were rejected. She obtained the scholarship in 2021 with and apologized too late. Not too late to her, but she's studying, but it was too late. And I was making the same pledge at the end of the presentation. You guys will see in Kyrgyzstan, in which we get together with Sarita, and also in Geneva, in the last high mountain climate summit in the headquarters of the WMO. And it was interesting. So they gave me 5 minutes to talk about these things, but it was not enough. We were preparing the COP for Chile, that it was moved to Spain, I guess, for some problems the political issues that were happening at the time in Chile. So my hope is that this presentation will make a difference. So our work in our little Universidad del Quindío hidden in the middle of the Andes of Colombia, beautiful place to go. All you guys are invited. We have been contributed to the production of the documents of the IPCC, with some of our advances in two main subjects. One is nature-based adaptation, and the other one is informatic-based adaptation. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of these reports of the IPCC. What we created in our university, we created a platform, as Sarita mentioned in my introduction. It's called Pisces. in Spanish makes more sense. It's Plataforma Informática de Servicios Climáticos Incorporados a Salud. And what is climate services? Climate services is taking data from the hydroclimatic cycles and transforming that into information, but with one strong item, and is that this information should be usable for decision making, not only for scientific purposes and to know more, but to solve problems of the people. This is what we are trying to do. And what are the main activities within this platform? We document nature, but the way in which we are documenting nature is taking advantage of this transdisciplinary work with people who knows other things that we as biologists don't know. So we are generating new software, we are generating new hardware. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of this. And we have been also with the amount of data that we have that are related with climate, water, and living systems. They need also a new way to be processed. And we have been working on that. And this is the way, let me introduce to you again, the platform. This is the way in which it looks, and it's pretty simple to read. So we collect information on the climate and on water in here, and we have information from diversity. We use artificial intelligence to process this information in order to couple this, what we know about nature in their abiotic and biotic compartments to different sectors of the society. Of course, the production sectors are important for many reasons, because those are the ones who gave us the food. It's not a minor issue. FAO knows that. And the other thing is because those activities are the main threats to diversity. So through our activities, as I mentioned before in the presentation, so we are forcing most of these processes. So they are part of the equation, not only users. So depending on the way in which we transform these productive methods, so we were going to have a nature that is going to work better or worse in order to do the regulating or to have these regulating capabilities from nature. And of course, we are working with the health sector. We are trying to learn how to report in a better way, not only the diseases as numbers, but the type of information that we need in order to generate something which is extremely important, that are early warnings. This is what we are trying to do. Even the construction. So we work in a close cooperation with the people who is in charge of building new pieces of the city of Armenia, which is the name of the main city in the department of Quindío. So we are a very attractive destiny for people in tourism, because this is a very beautiful land. And because of that, so we have an increment in terms of the infrastructure that is built in this place. And this is affecting the nature that we have. And all of these things, as you guys can see here, this is one of the most important arrows, goes into the policy making. This is our final end. How can we instruct with our information so the decision making process in our local government? So we are very fortunate because the Quindío is the smallest department in Colombia. It has just 1% of the continental area of Colombia, 1,000 square kilometers. This is pretty small. But we discovered that within this 1% of the area of the country, we have more than 25% of the diversity of the country. Because in this little small piece of land, so we have a huge mountain range that it goes from 5,400 meters to 900 meters. This is a huge diversity of opportunities for us. That wouldn't be possible without making alliances with all these sectors. interinstitutional construction of proposals to get the resources. So one thing that has been working for us in a very successful way is that we don't go into the different offices of the institutionality of Colombia and say, well, we need this kind of money to do that. They say, we need someone from your office to build a proposal. We are going to do the hard work, but we need someone to help us to direct this proposal. And it has been happening in a very successful way, and it has been enabled us to co-founding this research. So we are good partners, and is the main idea of this message. And this is only possible by establishing a very close dialogue with different people from different sectors, with different ideas about conservation, with different ideas about life, with different goals, but because all of them, they need to be on the table. And even the people who is making the worst things for nature, so those are the ones who we need to sit in front of us to start in a conversation. And this has been a very productive dialogue. In this part, so this I'm not thinking that you guys can read these things. So those are parts of the documents that we have. But I would like for you guys to see that we map every single one of these actors, and we place them in an schematic role. So we know where they are located. So we know from which sector they come from. We know in the platform. And this is something extremely interesting, because when it has been happening that there's people that say, I want to be part of the platform and I want to be there, or you located me wrong, so I would like to be in that particular place because I'm interacting with this and this and this and these other actors. And this has been extremely successful for us. And just to close this presentation with a couple of examples, I follow it without preparation, the same scheme that Filippo said, a general overview and an example from a particular place, and at the end of my presentation, I would like also to present some solutions. And these come from one of the projects that we have. It's a project that I like a lot. I love it because it's the first time that the Colombian government put money in order to generate an adaptation plan for climate change. So it's not money from the cooperation, it's money from the government of Colombia through what we call the Sistema General de Regalías, the money that is generated by the country in their activities, in its activities. And let's say that is, for us, is a kind of a big project, $6 million. So it's still, we are still implementing some of the actions, but we also have some preliminary results that are very interesting. So what we are looking at with our platform, so we take a curve look of nature in their abiotic and biotic compartments in order to detect unusual and usual behaviors of nature. And just to mention, I'm going to bring 3 examples. One is related to the water crisis that we have in Quindío. Despite Colombia is a country that has a lot of water, so this water and the quality of the water is related to the quality of the nature that we have. And we also are, in the Andes of Colombia has been lost 60% of the original coverage. And in Colombia, something very unique happened. So Colombia has the largest cities, the most populated cities in higher points all around the world. So Bogota, which officially has like 7 million people, and officially almost 10 million people, we are living 2,500 meters above sea level. So this La Paz is higher, but La Paz is like a neighborhood of Bogota. Bucaramanga, even Cali is 1,000 meters above sea level. So 75% of our population live in mountains, and 100% of the Colombian population depends on mountains. And mountains are extremely affected by this deforestation. Why Colombia has this pattern, which is opposite? Most of the other countries, they have their main cities in close to the ports, close to the sea. Buenos Aires, Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, to mention just another big cities in our region, in South America. It was because something that we call the fevers of the Magdalena River. It was a disease that prevented the establishment of the first Europeans that came with the conquerors into Colombia. Well, let's move to the water crisis. Well, let me recall this idea of the ecological dynamics that is associated to the behavior of the abiotic compartment of our planet, and thinking about species as opinions, as pieces within this machinery playing roles in the functioning of this machine. And I'm gonna introduce you guys here in this wait, let me go back here. So, you know, I don't know if you see my pointer, but this white spot that is moving is the city of Armenia. And here you have the Parque Los Nevados when we have our glaciers. Actually, this is Nevado del Ruiz, which is about to explode. It's a volcano. And what I want you guys to pay attention on is on the colors. So the dark green colors are the only forest remnants that we have. All the other colors that you see in this picture is transformed environments, is related to transformed environments. And this is another very important concept when we are talking about water, and is the basin of the Quindío River. So through this basin, the Quindío River fulfills the needs of water of at least 300,000 people who lives in Armenia, this city. And the river goes down and it goes into the lowlands, and it goes into another department who has paid for the treatment plant that we have. Of course, because what happened at land is something that needs to be handled by the people down there. And we had been creating documents. Those are the documents. There are 8 different documents associated to protected areas that we were able, we found a way to declare these areas protected areas to secure the water source for these people in Armenia. This is something that is a byproduct of this research. And this is because in Colombia we have a legislation, it's called the Ley 99 of 1993, in the Article 111, and it allows the mayor of the cities to invest even in other places, invest in buying land to generate or to create protected areas in order to secure the water resources. So we constructed the management plans for these areas up there. Why these forests are more important? You guys might think about the paramo, but in this particular video, you guys will see the dynamics that we have in the Andes, in which vegetation plays a very important role in terms of the water dynamics. And you guys can see this line of clouds. This line of clouds has a name. It's called the cloud forest. And it's because the biomass of the forest start to degrade it or particularize the drops of the rain, and it makes, even with a low temperature, for these drops to become steam and clouds. Move to the next slide. And what we have been doing here, so we have been studying, so this what we call the ecological flow of the Quindío River. And I'm going to show you guys what the people, the decision makers are reading. This is part of the documents that we constructed for them. And but behind that, so we have a project that is collecting data regularly, and we have been mapping all these different parts of the basin and analyzing what are the budgets of water for these different areas of the basin. This is a work that has been done in a work. The transdisciplinary thing is not just to say, is the transdisciplinary work that we conducted is because I'm a biologist, but I'm part of a group of engineers that are hydrologists. It's called the group of SIDERA. It's a research group which work with hydrological issues. And the other thing that is extremely important is that this research has been conducted also in harmony with the policies that we know exist in Colombia. So it's an important part of this transdisciplinary work is not just doing research in a separate way from the expectations that we have as a country. So we have been generating some goals, some points that we would like to reach as a society and as scientists. So is my perception. So we need to focus on these issues also, or besides the other interests that we have. And this is extremely interesting because by doing this research, which has as a focus studying the ecological fluxes of the Quindío River, so we had been doing in a parallel way a risk assessment and trying to understand so the stability of that terrain. So it's a mountainous system, so we have earthquakes and everything. Actually, the city of Armenia was devastated in 1999 by a huge earthquake, if you guys remember. And of course, so we have been setting the hardware and generating the software to study in a better way climate change in the region. And we have a collection of data that enables us to start generating early warnings, for example, of extreme episodes of raining and droughts and other aspects related with the hydrologic behavior of our region. And water quality that was mentioned also by Filippo, which is extremely important. So we regularly are monitoring these courses, and we are under the concept of bioindication. So we are reading what nature is telling us about the quality, not only of the water, but the quality of the environment. What is happening in terms of climate change, what is happening about these things that are kind of hidden or are not as obvious as all other things that we can perceive, like coliforms and all these kind of things. Of course, those are important to take into consideration, but we also want to understand, so what are the most susceptible elements of nature that can tell us in an early manner, so what kind of things are changing and having some clues about the future. And of course, we are using different technologies. We are using remote sensing in order to understand better the way in which vegetation behaves, and all these analyses that are conducted in a remote way, so are validated on the terrain. And we have been identifying some group of plants and animals that, as I mentioned, we can use as bioindicators of phenomena like the climate change. And like my beautiful bats, so this is a beautiful bat. I don't know what you guys think about bat. It's a pretty interesting Histiotus, the one who has high ears. This is what the meaning what is the meaning of the name. And course, so this shouldn't be possible if we don't include a social component. So the people which is around these areas. So you guys can see here, this is actually an attraction for tourism to see these palms. But the original way in which these palms exist is within a forest. And now people goes and take pictures with besides dead palms that actually, because they cannot even reproduce to each other, because some of them, the males and female palms, are sometimes very far away from one to another. And but we are trying to transmit the message of the quality of life that represents to have a better nature, or a nature that is working in a better way. And it surprises. So even technology is something that we think that sometimes that could prevent people to understand things, and actually it has been happening in the opposite way. So people start getting more and more interested about our project by looking at the platform and the outputs of the platform. And of course, so this is part of a pedagogy that we have been doing by creating this type of documents as the one that you guys have seen. And talking a little bit about health surveillance and the movement on species, we have been focusing on target groups of animals that we know that are important agents, and we have been generating the management tools to handle these populations. Those, one of them is bats, as I mentioned, the reasons, and the other one is the carnivores. And also within the logic that we have been establishing, those are the points in which we have been monitoring population of these animals. This is science conducted mostly by the power of women. They do better science, at least in Quindío, than male. And as a result, yeah, I'm gonna close. Sorry? Please, Elizabeth. Sorry, Elizabeth. Well, well, I'm gonna try to continue. Well, the thing is that we passed from being a department in Colombia. Could you please close the microphone, Elizabeth? Hello. So we went from being a could you guys close?
PIT that could help us and support in muting Elizabeth. I can't seem to be. I think.
Okay. Yeah, because it's difficult.
Emanuele, are you able to mute her? I'm not able to.
No, I can stop her because the symbol of the microphone disappears. So I don't know. This is crazy.
Well, I'm gonna try to close. Yes,
I'm gonna expel
sorry
her.
about that. But well, so we went from being a department, looking at how small it is, in which we didn't know much about our nature, of being maybe the department in Colombia that has the most organized information on their nature, and particularly about mammals, in terms of monitoring potential zoonotic events. So we know what are the ranges of distribution across the elevational range. So we know where the diversity of these different organisms is located, the bats, the rodents, the carnivores, the mammals in general. So we did this exercise for every single group. We know about the genetic relationships that we have among different populations. So we have which ones are more different from one to another. And in that generates at least a scenario in which we start like chasing some particular agents of interest, but more importantly, it will provide to us a response if an event of an emergent disease appears. And I think that in that sense, so we are pioneers, I think, in the world, because I haven't seen much initiatives like this one, in which we had been trying to implement all the technology that we have. Of course, for sure, things can be improved, and probably you guys, from your expertises, will provide some inputs into this type of information. But look at what happened with the felids. Felids, as any other carnivore, so they need a huge amount of land to survive. So this is the general pattern for carnivores. So carnivores, they need a large area to survive. And what we have as a result of the alterations that we have been making to the forest, this is the actual the way in which these environments look currently. So small patches, every time more reduced and more concentrated into the highlands. As you guys might remember the overfly in the last slide. And what happened inside these patches? This is extremely interesting. So we have not only felids, so we have some other carnivores that are competing for day by day and smaller number of preys. And as a result, so these individuals, so they don't have any other option that go and explore areas, open areas, in which what they found is a productive system. So we are trying to understand what is the relationship of these wild animals and the different ways in which we produce the things that we produce in different places. And we have been trying to map these relationships. And the other thing is, we started to understand what's going on with the particular issue of diseases. So this is a pretty common scenario that we have in the Andes of Colombia, remnants of forests in the upper part of the mountains. Then you have the productive systems here, like a coffee plantation, and you have a lot of different animals living within these. And runoff of water plays a very important role, because this concentration of animals in there that are exchanging potential zoonotic agents. So it's very easy to think that through the feces and the urine and the dead bodies of these animals or their prey. So these diseases, these agents, these zoonotic etiological agents is what we call technically. So they go into the water bodies and they are served to every single home in Armenia through the public service of water of the city. For you guys to have an idea, a hectare is not very much. In a hectare of forest associated to farm in which we work, we found 7 different carnivores. This is the jaguarundi, the tigrina, the margai, the taira, the mapache, cerdocentos, there's a fox, this is the coati. And all of them, so they have different evolutionary histories. They used to be separated or in different compartments of the forest. They use different times. And now what is happening is that we have these animals living in the forest. Hopefully you guys can see the videos. And you can see the taira on the left is a mustelid animal, weasel, a little bit bigger than a regular European weasel. And you guys can see here the other problem that we have. So we as humans, we go with our domesticated animals. So these animals, they are not feral dogs, so they are dogs from farms. But when two dogs get together, so they recall that they are hunters and partners, and they are doing what dogs do. And this is another is affiliate. It's called the gato moro or the jaguarundi, and it's amazing because within this small patch of vegetation, so these animals are trying to do their lives. And what you guys can see here is the female jaguarundi. We are celebrating the Mother's Day in Colombia today, so this is a perfect video. And as you guys can see here, so this species has a particularity. It has two color faces. So one of the cubs, the little cats, has a darker coloration than the other. What happens in an animal that was hit by a car? This one that comes into the mammal collection, which I run, and we conducted some genetic analysis for toxoplasma, which is a nasty parasite associated with cats. Wild cats, they have their own variants of toxoplasma, and we found the first record for the Quindío, and not only in cats but also in bats. And this is something that is extremely.
Can you hear me? If we could wrap
See,
up with 17.
yeah, I'm just with this.
Great, thank you.
This is the last slide, and with that, so this what we are doing is we are cooking, we are creating the recipe of the ingredients in our management of emerging diseases within this climate change scenario. And with that, so hopefully, so I was able to present a different perspective of the water problem, which is the main problem for all of us and the main opportunity for all of us to establish a better management of our environments and having a better life for our population. So thank you, Livio, for the invitation. Thank you, Sarita. Greetings to Rosa Laura, Antonella, all the people of the Mountain Partnership, and all the people that has been attending this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hugo, for taking us in the Andes and really showing us your transsectoral work of the University of Quindío. I mean, fascinating. The amount of work I wasn't aware. So we are running very late. I would just give one question, if there is one. I saw a hand. Was it Margarita Vesnetova? Did you have a question, or was it a wave?
Yes, I just was uploading the presentation.
Okay.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. I have a question. How big is your team? Because you, as it seems like, are doing everything, you know?
As you see, Margarita, at the beginning of the presentation, we are a center. So we had a huge team because there are 42 researchers, which are mainly professors at the university, and we have the students, slaves, men and women that they work for having their grades. So graduate students are extremely important, and undergraduate students are important in this scheme of generating knowledge. So you need an army to do that. Let me tell you. But academia is an environment in which you have this potential, this capacity built already. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Hugo. Just to mention that we have all our recordings and lectures will be eventually loaded to the web page. In the chat, you have the address. So we'll also send you all a mail, both next Monday and then the Monday afterwards, so you know where to look for the presentations and the videos. I really want to thank you all for today. Apologies for that intermission, technical glitch. It happens. That's what happens when we have these platforms. We're never quite sure who can enter. But I think it was two very different presentations from different parts of the world, different approaches. I hope you found them enriching as I did. And we look forward to seeing you again next Monday at the same time. We'll have another week of very interesting lectures from around the world. So again, I'd like to thank you all for attending and for participating. And I wish you a very good weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.